All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the product rule. Product is a fancy word for multiplication. So let's see if this is an easy process. So if f of x equals x squared x cubed, or we can think of this as f of x equals u times v, where this here would be the u and this here would be the v, so it's u times v. Can we just calculate f prime of x as being u prime v prime? So I'm wondering if I have f of x equals x squared x cubed, can I just say that f prime of x is going to be equal to the derivative of the u, or the first term, which would be what? 2x squared. I'll put a question mark here because we're not sure it's true. So that was my derivative of my first term, and then let's multiply by the derivative of the second term, which in this case would be the derivative of x cubed. Well, what's the derivative of that? That is 3x squared. Okay, now, what does this simplify to? Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. Remember, we add exponents when we are multiplying them. So the question is this true? Is the derivative of x squared x cubed equals 6x to the fourth? In other words, can we just take the derivative of both and multiply them? Well, we actually know the derivative of this because we know, and let me go a different color because we're talking about something new here. We know that I can rewrite this as f of x equals x to the fifth. I'm just simplifying this. And we also know from the power rule that f prime of x is going to be bring that 5 down and then keep your x and then subtract 1 from that is the fourth. So we know that's true. Does that match this? It absolutely does not match. So this is not true. We know that we cannot do this. When we're taking the derivative of two things that are multiplied, we cannot just take the derivative of the first and then multiply by the derivative of the second. That does not work. It is a common mistake that people do, and you will inevitably get the problem wrong. So what do we do? Okay, well, here's the rule, Rule 5, the product rule. The product of two differentiable functions, u and v, is differentiable, and we can say that the derivative of u times v is going to be u prime v plus v prime u. So pause this video, get that down, and then I'm going to write a different way to explain that or to say that. All right, another way to say that is to take the derivative of something, I'll call it f of x equals, I'm going to call it the first thing times the second. That's going to be equal to the derivative of the first times the second plus the derivative of the second times the first. Again, I would take some time to pause this video and get that down. So how are these the same exact thing? Well, notice how u is the first. So we're taking the derivative of the first, then times the second, plus the derivative of the second, so the derivative of the second thing, times the first. So that's the rule, and it might seem a little confusing to you right now, but let's go ahead and apply it. Okay, this question is asking us to find the derivative of two things that are being multiplied. This here would be our u, this here would be our v. You could also think of this as being your first, and this as being your second. All right. All right, so what we're going to do is take the derivative of this. So we're going to say that d dx of this function, square root of x times x squared plus 3x to the fourth, is going to be equal to the derivative of the first. So this is going to be u prime, or we can think of that as the derivative of the first. Well, what is the derivative of the first? Well, we know we can rewrite that as x to the 1/2. So taking the derivative of my first thing would be bring that 1/2 down in front, x, subtract 2 over 2. Well, keep your denominators as over 2, and 1 minus a 2 would give me a -1. So that's the derivative of the first, or u prime. Now we have to multiply that by what? We have to multiply that by v, or the second. Well, what is the second? Well, that's just going to be this thing right here. That's the second. So that's going to be x squared plus 3x to the fourth. So we're halfway done. We have our u prime v, or the derivative of the first times the second. Now we have to go plus, and now we need to do v prime u. Okay, so next we're going to have something here that is v prime. Well, remember, this is my u and this is my v. So the derivative of v, or this thing right here, is going to be a 2x plus a 12x cubed. So that's my v prime, or the derivative of the second. Okay. Now we need to do multiplied by the first, or multiplied by u. So this would be just plain old u, or the first. Okay, in this case, what's our first? It will be square root of x. So this is it. This is our answer. We are done. Here it is right here. So we've got the derivative of our first times our second, plus the derivative of our second times the first. Or if you want to use the other method, you could certainly say u prime v plus v prime u. All right, let's try this one now. I'm not going to break it down as much as I did on the last ones. All right, so our f prime of x is going to be the derivative of our first, which is 1, times our second, which is e to the x, plus the derivative of our second thing, which is actually just e to the x, and then times the first. So that'd be times x. So that's going to be equal to e to the x plus x e to the x. And you can certainly simplify that or leave that as is. If you wanted to simplify it, it would be e to the x and then 1 plus x. I will accept either of these answers. Doesn't matter to me. Now, if you're not a fan of that saying the derivative of the first times the second plus the derivative of the second times the first, instead, I could teach this as u prime and then times v plus v prime, which would be the derivative of this, times u, which is just plain this. Whichever works best. I kind of like the derivative of the first times the second plus derivative of the second times the first, but it's your choice. All right, last one here that we're going to do together. So my f prime of x is going to be the derivative of my first, which is cosine x, then just plain old times the second, so it's cosine x, plus, now we're going to do the derivative of the second, which is a minus sine x, times the first. So that's going to be times sine x. Or you can just write it like that. So now we certainly can simplify this. This is going to be a cosine squared x minus a sine squared x. and you are done. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll certainly get more practice with this. Take care.